We can start the instructions.
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. If attending in person, please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. If translation is provided, click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you're in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby or complete a blue speaker card as available. If you need assistance, please find a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items. Times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. More time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on making a public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-2432. That's 909-396-2432. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
Well, thank you. Welcome to our Friday, March 14th, 2025 hybrid legislative committee meeting. I'll ask Maria Corlejo to please take the roll.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mayor Lock-Dawson?
Here.
Thank you. Supervisor Hagman?
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Olmos?
Here.
Thank you. Supervisor Perez? Absent. Councilmember Rahman? Absent. Councilmember Caccioti?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Maria. So first item, we have action discussion items and a couple items. And the first one is interview to select legislative representation in Sacramento. And Lisa Tanaka, our Deputy Executive Officer of Legislative, Public Affairs and Media, will lead us in this. Lisa, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. This morning, we will be interviewing 2 firms for state legislative representation in Sacramento for South Coast AQMD. The board approved this RFP on January 10th in the amount of $180,000. This representation is necessary at the beginning of this really busy 2-year state session. There are major budget and policy issues to consider. There are 37 new members of the legislative body. And yesterday we also heard from CAPCOA that over 66% of the staff in Sacramento have less than 5 years experience. So having this representative out there advocating on behalf of South Coast is critical. The RFP was published through major news groups, legislative caucuses, chambers, and business associations, as well as through South Coast AQMD's online portal and our social media. There are 2 firms. The first one is Actum, and the second is Resolute. And if the committee is ready, we can bring in Actum for to be interviewed.
We're ready. Go ahead. Good morning. Welcome to our legislative committee meeting. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, and then we'll give you about a couple minutes to talk about your company, and we'll open up for questions. Anybody online from your office?
Are we on? Yes, it's joining via Zoom.
Okay, staff will check. Let's see if they can find him. They're looking right now. I see him on there. He's down about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or so.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's listed on there, but I don't, there he's at the top with his hand raised. So Fabian, you can go ahead, please. You're muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. But can you see me?
We can't see you, but we hear you.
Okay, I think I know why you can't see me.
He should be moved over as a panelist.
Fabian, there you are. We're moving you
Oh,
over. We see you right
really?
now.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead,
All right.
please. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize for not being there in person. I'm overseas, and so I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
But I just want to just first of all to say to you, thank you for the work that you're doing to advance the interest of protecting um, the Southern California's air quality and making sure that all of the various sectors, whether it be transportation, whether it's the utility sector, whether it's the goods movement sector, to protect the air quality and the air that all communities breathe. And I'm particularly fond of the work of the AQMD because of the disproportionately impacted communities that you serve. And obviously, for a lot of us in the environmental rights movement, the question of air quality isn't just an issue um, of the environment, but it's also a health issue for many of our communities. And I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that. So I'm here with you today on behalf of ACTM, which is a firm that we founded approximately 3.5 years ago. And we exist in California, have over 40 people in our firm in the state. We're also in New York and Washington, D.C., and in London, which is where I am today. But our firm in California, we're born out of Los Angeles, which is where our firm is based. And a lot of the work that we do, is complex issues on behalf of our clients, but also bread and butter legislative issues. So in many cases, people will reach out and come to us when they have a complex matter that's difficult to get done, or if it's issues where folks need representation. But just specifically to just give you a little bit on our firm, the main primary focus of our firm is as a strategic consultancy. But as such, we have various different services that we provide, not the least of which is strategic communications, lobbying, crisis communications, digital communications, paid advertisement, among other things that encompass the public affairs arena. And so, we're very, very pleased to be before you today on this issue. And I personally wanted to just introduce our group. With us today is Duncan McFetrich, who's my partner, runs the Sacramento office for ACTM, as well as Tina Vartanian, who is a senior vice president in the firm, who works both in Southern California, in Sacramento, and to various degrees, other clients around the country as well. So we're here to, obviously you have a copy of our proposal that in our response to the RFP. But I just want to mention a couple of things that I think are really important as you think about the 2025 legislative year and going forward. Which is, given just the complexities of what's happening at the federal level versus the state level, whether you're talking about air quality, whether you're talking about combating climate change, clean energy, environmental justice. Obviously, the agendas between the federal and the state government have shifted. Therefore, our recommendation to you as you think about how to best position the AQMD is to do one of three things. One is to continue to protect your funding sources because it's very, very important. Two, to make sure that as you see the reauthorization of AB 617 on cap and trade, that we find opportunities for the AQMD to get its rightful sources of income, and then look for an increase in funding wherever possible to allow you to adequately address the question of enforcing the environmental requirements that you're charged with doing. And so with that, I would just turn it over to Duncan McFetrich and Tina Vartanian. And if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer any questions. Duncan?
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chair, Duncan McFetrich. I'm a partner at ACTM, as Fabian said. I've over 30 years of experience in California politics, first in Washington, D.C., and then in Sacramento, serving elected officials. And for the last 20 years, I've been lobbying and advocating on behalf of clients on a whole multitude of complex issues. And as Fabian said, some bread and butter on behalf of clients. We can get into more of specific case studies as it relates to other questions you may have.
And Tina Vartanian, I'm a senior vice president with ACTM, mainly lobby in LA County, LA City, but I support Sacramento as we build coalitions and talk about the different arms of the umbrella that fall under the same umbrella.
Great. That's a good opening. So I'll open up to committee members that ask questions. And I've got several committee members here, the Mayor Locke Dawson, Councilmember Olmos, myself, and Supervisor Hagman. Who'd like to go first with questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm Kurt Hagman. Fabian, so I know that you guys have different experiences. I was in what with the new legislature. I mean, the state's completely new. So what's the strategy between last election cycle, this election cycle, to go out and start, approach them with the AQMD, South Coast AQMD issues? And what do you think is the primary focus here?
Yeah, good question. Mr. Hagman, Supervisor. As we were walking in, I heard, staff report that I think, it's 72% of the legislature has served 4 years or less. And so that's a big challenge. I mean, there's a learning curve, not only for the legislators, as you recall, but for the advocates too, and building those relationships, getting to know them, getting them to trust them, bringing the issues to them in the appropriate fashion. And I think that goes to the heart of the matter. I mean, there's a timing element, but given all of the things that are happening in Washington, D.C. and the state and all the challenges that are presented from the state, the learning curve has to shrink, the time has to shrink. And it's incumbent upon, your advocates and advocates of other organizations and clients to get in and shrink that time span for them to really learn the issues and understand how those issues impact their constituents, particularly the ones in Southern California as it relates to South Coast.
I would also just add, it begs the question, because you have to shrink that timeline, as Duncan mentioned. It requires you to have deep relationships. The folks that represent you, whether it's us or anyone else, should have deep relationships with the incoming members of the legislature, but even more important with the leadership, because there is an institutional memory in Sacramento. And that institutional memory lies within, whether it's the California Air Resource Board, whether it's with the governor's office and the governor's leadership team, and whether it's the speaker's office or the pro tem's office. Having those deep relationships is going to be really, really important as you move forward, because there's like a whole process of re-educating all of the folks that have just come in, but then there's a process of making sure, because it's almost like you're more reliant on the leadership at the same time. So it's like a top-down and bottom-up relationship building process that needs to take place.
I was going to say, with 77% or whatever new legislature and staff, there is no deep relationships at this point. So it is like a full-sale prioritizing of education and protecting status quo or funding sources.
If I may, Supervisor, just to follow up on that. And I think that's where like the institutional memory comes into play. And as you recall, folks like Kip Lipper and other folks in the, speaker's office and the pro tem's office with deep institutional knowledge, those are important. We have those relationships. Those are important relationships to go to right away and make sure that, we're hitting all the members and all of the key staff, on the issues that are of importance to the district.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. I see two hands raised. We'll start with Mayor Locke Dawson and then go to Councilmember Olmos next. Mayor, please.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. Sorry, I'm remote as well. I'm getting over a nasty cold. I have two questions, and I'll say them both and then you can answer. One is organizational and one is kind of strategy and skills. Dr. Vartanian, I think it's Dr. Vartanian, mentioned she focuses on LA and LA County in that area. But could you talk a little bit more about how you're distributed throughout the state and how, who's where and who are the I guess, who are the focuses like in Sacramento and LA, San Diego, that sort of thing? And then secondly, Duncan, I think you mentioned you had some case studies. I would love to hear at least one success story that you love to brag about, or also you too, Mr. Nunez, if you have something you'd like to just showcase that your firm has been able to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. I could take the first question. So Fabian and I are based in our Los Angeles office, and Duncan is actually based in our Sacramento office. He just flew down for this meeting. But in terms of the work distribution, I think Fabian and Duncan would be the leads. Obviously, Duncan would be the lead lobbyist in Sacramento. I would serve as a project manager in terms of making sure nothing falls through the cracks, offering support. We also have support staff that can help us in both offices. So we'll be very well-rounded.
I would just add, in the Sacramento office, we have 9 registered lobbyists and support staff to support all of our activities. And then, Fabian, you want to start on your case study with AB 32? And then,
No, that was not an Actum case study, so I don't want to. Go ahead, Doug.
so the one case, it's not on point for the environment, but one of the key, I think, case studies that we engaged in over the years was the Charter Time Warner Cable merger, which was a significant merger, as folks know, in Southern California. Spectrum or Charter is the main cable and broadband provider. That was a big fight to get that merger approved. We had to work through the legislature, had to work through the Public Utilities Commission, and foster support for that merger. And ultimately, we were very successful. And that was a lot of moving parts. That was a short way of saying it was very complex. It was very tenuous, but we were able to get it across the finish line.
Just to say on that issue, because we were all involved in that, there were a number of groups that were hired. We were the lead firm on that, so we reported directly to the general counsel and the CEO's office on that, and basically led that entire merger and effort in California.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Olmos, go ahead, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brenda Olmos, and I'm a council member from the city of Paramount. Quick question for you. As council members, not elected officials, it's all about advocating for our cities, and we are the voices for our communities. So can you describe what your process is and how you would advocate for South Coast AQMDs, especially when it comes around to the policies around, the mobile emissions, including AB 617 and the funding to cap and trade reauthorization? So again, just kind of want to understand your guys' process on how you guys would advocate for those.
If I may, thank you. Great question. I think that, and we've read through the priorities for the district, but that's what we usually do when we first, work on behalf of a client, is we understand the issues that are important to that client, and we prioritize those issues, and then we determine what the best course of action is in order to either stand alone and move the agenda of the client, in this case, the district, or determine what the coalition is going to be in order to satisfy and obtain the policies that the district is looking to do. And that, every issue is different. Requires a different approach, whether it's, going into a committee and getting a chair to, support those efforts, on to the next committee, or, as I said, build a coalition and build momentum and inertia to get, like, for example, on cap and trade, that's going to be, that is one of the big reauthorization efforts that is going to drive more funding to AB 617. And that's going to be a collective approach. There's a lot of organizations that are interested in seeing that occur in a certain fashion.
And to add to that, if I may, I think another piece that Actum is really good at doing is working with staff, seeing what has been done in the past, taking the messaging and really altering it to whatever the target audience is. So focusing on the different priorities that would focus different committees, different members that we would want to target. So I think really honing in on the different messages that would resonate with that specific member is something that we excel in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I'll just follow up a little bit. I've read your background of the staff and everybody, and a lot of work with the Spectrum merger. With regard to air quality issues, if you can, you've been in Sacramento a while.
Yep.
Tell us maybe some of the issues you've worked on over the last 10 years on specifically regarding air quality and what you see the future air quality issues during this legislative session that we really should focus on.
Yeah, you know, some of those case studies, as far as air quality, you know, heavy work around the RPS, clean technologies. Just last year, worked on a pretty significant bill, AB 2661 by Assembly Member Soria from Fresno. And that authorized the Westlands Water District to have the ability to build and construct solar, large-scale solar on fallowed lands. They've got about over 100,000 acres of fallowed land that is unusable right now. And so we passed a bill and the governor signed it to allow for the district to co-develop a large solar installation. That's one example. Worked on electric vehicles over the years, charging stations. And so that's the big push, for the last couple of years, including this year, is continuing to push for installation of more charging stations for electric vehicles. Do you have anything? Yeah.
I think there was a second part to that question towards the end. I think I missed that part. How do we see this going? Can I just, I think I heard
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
You did.
Just what's the future of the environmental movement in California or something similar to that? Maybe I misunderstood it.
No, you're right. Pretty much in this legislative session and going forward, what do you think are some of the big air quality issues that we should be working on or you're focusing on as our consultant?
Yeah, I'll say just for me personally, inside of my firm, I always make it a point when it comes to environmental issues to try not to monetize my work around that for the most part. Why? Because I feel like on a volunteer basis, I've advised the Air Resources Board before, the governor's office, going back to when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor, and then with Jerry Brown. Every time that there is a big move, whether it's to net zero or what have you, whether it was Governor Schwarzenegger on the question that he was pursuing, in a very dramatic way once upon a time. He backed off of it eventually, on energy, and then Jerry Brown, the diversification of the energy portfolio of utility industry. And then obviously with Governor Gavin Newsom on the question of net zero and net zero pollutants. And I would say that in all of those processes, one of the things that I've noticed is that as California continues to build a strong sort of environmental repertoire, what you're seeing is, there was a time where other states were rapidly adopting, and you've seen a little bit of a slowdown in that. And part of that really has to do with the mechanics of the impact that environmental policies are going to have on the economy. But I still believe very firmly that no matter what's happening at the federal level, California's environmental positioning will continue down the path that it's on right now. I don't see very many changes. I mean, if you look at the utility industry, if you look at the oil industry, everyone is looking for alternative fuels, alternative ways to produce energy in a way that's has doesn't in a way that doesn't have an adverse impact on the environment. And so that will continue to happen. However, I would say for you, as you position yourself, I would look for, 2 to 3 things to focus on, because I remember in the past, both when I was in the legislature and obviously as I was out of the legislature, and I had many conversations at the time with one of your former chairs, Dr. Bill Burke, around your legislative agenda. There were times where I would see like a legislative agenda from the AQMD that had 12 to 15 different things that you were pursuing. And then sometimes you would get maybe 1 or 2, or you would negotiate a little bit on the fringes on something. I think as you look at the changing environment around climate, I would really focus on 1 or 2 things every year that are really, really important to you, and then lean into those things and try to, extract as much to the benefit of the AQMB as possible. And clearly, I think it's a better way to approach a legislative agenda and say, instead of being involved in 25 different conversations, focus on those things that are critically important to you, and then really lean into them to try to, and be successful at obtaining those things.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez. Committee members, is there any follow-up questions? Staff? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, the next firm coming in is Quintana and Associates. And just as a little reminder, so they'll come in and then they'll wait for you to ask the questions.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Quintana. Good morning, Mr. Entando. Good to see you. So if you want, if we could have a little opening statement if you want.
Good morning.
And then we'll
Thank you.
open it up for questions.
Good morning. Yeah, I think you all say like 2 minutes.
Great.
If that's okay, and then I'll
Yeah.
let Alfredo talk. When we came on 10 years ago, we came on with one goal, and that was to represent air quality. And I think that's what we've done over the past 10 years. We are a firm we don't have offices in London and Nigeria and Singapore. We got one office, and that's in Sacramento, and it's right across from the Capitol. And that's where we spend every single day, is in that Capitol working for you. We're not here to give you global advice. We're here to follow your orders and follow the orders of the executive team for what you need done for air quality. And after that, I think I'll pass it over to Alfredo.
That was a quick 2 minutes.
Very quick. Good morning, Alfredo Redondo, partner at Resolute. The only thing that I would add is that we really do focus and pride ourselves on focusing on the 4 Ps that, as I put it, for policymaking. One is the people, right? And we've heard from staff about how important that is these days because of the turnover and not only the legislators, but staff. Second is the politics. And there's probably not a better team that I can think of outside of Resolute that can really address and keep up with all the politics in Sacramento across multiple sectors, which ultimately benefits when you only care about one sector, like air quality. You have to be able to maintain a clear focus on the overall landscape. Third is the process. We are experts in how bills are navigated, and most importantly, the budget. It's a very opaque process. It's one that not a lot of people understand. We have garnered a lot of expertise, and as a result, a lot of successful wins, including those for the AQMD. And then the final P that I'll mention is the policy. And that's where, as David just alluded to, we follow your direction, your advice, your input. We become fluent in the policy, but you all are the subject matter experts that really understand where we need to go, and we help you get there.
Thank you, Fredo. We'll open up for questions. I'll go through the same order. Mr. Supervisor Hagman, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you? Some of the same questions I asked your other firm was, you do have like 70% new legislators up there. So it's a huge learning curve for both the new members as well as their staffs. I don't know how many of the staffs are recycled through there or not. But with so many complex issues with air quality, where would you start on that? What would you ask us to prioritize as you go with your experience with us in the background?
Yeah, thank you for that question, sir. I appreciate it. You know, because of my wide breadth of clients, it allows me to get in front of a lot of these elected officials long before they're actually in Sacramento. And so I think that's what I'm very good at. I would put my political access up to anyone that you will meet in Sacramento. So what I have done is enabled us to get these relationships early, because I get to meet people when they're first running in the primaries and then the general. And then by the time they get to Sacramento, I pretty much know everybody. I could maybe count on one hand of the people that I have not met yet. And let me tell you where that has actually come to as a win for South Coast. We were contacted by the executive team on a bill idea 3 days before the bill deadline. I think you're familiar with the bill on the air quality incident response. And it was very important to the executive team and very important to you, sir. And it's like 3 days before, and I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do here? It's almost bill deadline. Everybody's had their bill. And I was like, you know what? New members might not have all their bills filled out yet because they're new folks. People haven't talked to them. Well, I went to a legislator that I had met, right, throughout the process. And she's new, Assemblywoman Rodriguez. And I said, hey, I got a deal for you. And so we now have AB 1107 Rodriguez, and she's carrying that bill. And that's because we got out there early, met the members before they got to Sacramento.
I would add too, I think, you know, in Sacramento, the world gets a little small. You know, a lot of people know each other and know the folks that are coming up, you know, on the wing, so to speak. One example that I'll use to elucidate this is that similarly, in the day before the bill introduction deadline, we had an office reach out. This staff person is new to this new office, Assemblymember Solache, who I'm sure you all are very familiar with. And the staffer we had worked with very closely when she was working for Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia. And so she reached out, said, hey, do you have any bill ideas that we should be considering? You know, it's getting late to the deadline. There was, as part of the team that South Coast has put together, we aren't the only lobbying team. And we work very well with the other teams and stay coordinated. So we were able then to hand off and say, hey, here's an opportunity. It's not going to be through me and David, but it's still the South Coast team, and they ran with it, right? So I think it really speaks to the fact that if you're on the ground, if you have a presence that people then begin to learn and trust, that will, down the line, just reap continued dividends as those relationships just continue to grow.
Can I just make a correction for the record? It's AB 1106. I misspoke. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Just to follow up, Mr. Chair, if I could. Kind of joking because you said the politics in Sacramento, like there's any politics going on at all between, especially between the state and the feds right now. There's no issues whatsoever. And with the state budget the way it is, I mean, you know, is it a defensive posture we take or more of an offensive posture going forward with some of the rules and stuff with, you know, all the different cycles going on? What's your thoughts?
So fully 1/3 of the state budget, which is hovering around 300 billion. So you could imagine about 100 billion of it. We are dependent on the federal government for on an annual basis. So there is a very strong chance that we're going to see some ramifications come down over the next year and the next 4 years to come. With that in mind, what we have been focused on in Sacramento is how do we ensure that we're securing the funding that has already been promised or committed, especially around topics like 617 funding, and this will be a topic that I think we bring up as one of the case studies of success, but understanding that as funding from the IRA, for example, that might have already been committed to South Coast, $500 million worth, that can be in flux. And we'll continue to focus on what the other opportunities are to maybe backfill or find additional funding from state resources, if there are any. There are a few, GGRF being chief among them, and then that'll implicate the cap and trade reauthorization conversation. So, you know, we also stay in contact with the federal lobbying team to get updates on what's happening there. Which is always helpful for us to understand how we think that's going to ultimately impact what we're seeing and what we're working on in Sacramento.
Let's go. Thank you, Supervisor. We'll move to Mayor Lock Dawson. Mayor, go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for being here this morning. Excuse me. I'm going to ask kind of the same question that I asked the other team, is just, could you talk a little bit about how you're organized? And then also maybe you gave us a couple success stories, I think already, but would love to hear something specific to some of the efforts that we're working on here at AQMD. Thank you.
Sure, and thank you for the question. I'll start it off. We're organized very simply. Anyone that you interview here today will be here for you every single time you have a phone call or every time you need a meeting. Who you see is our organization. We have 8 lobbyists in our office in Sacramento, but the South Coast team is Alfredo Arredondo and David Quintana. And we will always be there for you, and we're the only 2 that you will have. So that's our organization. I hope that explained that. It's rather simple, but we want to make sure that who you're seeing is who you're buying. Alfredo?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think one of the things that has always been a constant struggle and dynamic in Sacramento is the differences of opinion around air quality versus climate change, right? And how those 2 topics are often commingled, and people assume like, oh, if you're here to talk about air quality, then we're also talking about the same thing with climate change. And the answer is that ultimately these are very separate subjects. There is some overlap. And as a result, for us, one of our moments of pride was being able to get the Carl Moyer reauthorization legislation through a couple of years ago. And those are conversations that we were going into offices saying, oh, this is about climate change. No, this is about air quality. And this is about the impacts to communities at the local level. One thing that is particularly going to be a point of focus is AB 617, because again, when cap and trade was reauthorized in 2017 under legislation authored by Assemblyman Garcia, there had to be a companion that was 617. And so for the same reasons, it's really important that we are developing really good narratives. We know what they are because we've been working with you all for so long. It's not going to be a junior lobbyist or an intern that comes in that has none of the background that we do, who we're then asking to work on your behalf. We are who's going to be working on your behalf.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Olmos from the great
Yes.
city of Paramount.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for being here as well. And actually, you just answered half of my question when you talked about AB 617 and some of your processes. But again, can you just give us a little bit more background on what your process is when you advocate or when you come to the table to advocate for South Coast? So what would be some of your processes or strategies?
I'll continue using the example of 617. So we've always had a challenge every year. I call it a food fight in the budget, going after funding from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, because there are a plethora of interests, all in different sectors, who are all trying to be able to garner or secure some of the funding from the GGRF. So a few years ago, we went to Assemblyman Eduardo Garcia, very common theme with that gentleman, as you've heard from me. And he committed to work with us on securing a long-term commitment around 617 funding. That came to fruition a couple of years ago, and it culminated in negotiations with the Senate and with the governor's office, including with Lauren Sanchez, the governor's climate advisor, where ultimately they said, we can't get you all the way to 300 annually as a commitment, but we'll get you to 250. And you all can come back every year and we can see if we can increase that if the budget allows. And so that was a tremendous win, where now we don't have to fight from zero every year. We're fighting from 250, and that's been a commitment that's actually been kept by the governor, as opposed to we've seen other cuts and reversions being made in other sectors. So I think it's a testament to us making it a priority amongst the legislature and the administration in a way that I think others have struggled to get there. So hopefully that provides a little bit more color on how we like to engage.
Well, Councilwoman Olmos, I'd like to, because not all, as you know, being an elected official, half the time politics is a knife fight in the mud. And, they don't always go this smoothly. Sometimes they are what they are, which is just ugly. And so, for example, there is a bill right now, SB 34, and because of my relationship with the author before she got elected, before the senator got elected, I was able to get insight into the bill. And when the bill was introduced, I was able to get a heads up, get our executive team immediately a face-to-face meeting with that senator off the floor of the Senate so that we could engage the senator immediately, right? Before the bill's in print, while they're still talking about language. Now that fight is continuing to go on, but I wanted to give you an example of where it's not just, a kind of a normal process. That one is kind of an ugly slugfest, and we'll see where it ends up. But, that's one where we're just going to have to continue to fight, and it's going to be messy.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. You've answered most of my question, but just kind of following up, Mr. Quintana, regarding the bill regarding CARB that you got into the last couple of days and a kind of an incident response to these crazy fires with global climate change. What are your thoughts for the success of that bill this year, and what's your strategies for getting that through to the end?
Yeah, well, I feel good. We've just finalized the language with Legislative Council, so that language is finally finished. I don't think we've had a chance to run it up the flagpole yet and see what people think. So I think I would have a better answer for you once I get some feedback on the language. The issue, I think, politically, the issue will be good. I think we'll have people understand the intention of the bill, and that should be fine. As is the case with many bills, it's going to be money. Will we be able to get the money carved out either in the budget or through appropriations? And so that's going to be where folks like us have to go and, as I mentioned to Councilwoman Olmos, engage in that knife fight in the mud and to try to get the money for us.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any last questions before we move on? Seeing none, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Lisa and Wayne, if you want to, this is an action item, so if you want to direct us what we should do now? And your recommendations, if you have one.
Yes. So Chair, as you can see from the interviews, both are qualified firms, but the scoring panel, which included Philip Crabb, Denise Peralta-Gailey, and we had an external person from SCAG, Kevin Gilhooly, all scored resolute, clearly far ahead from Actum. And while Actum is very qualified, Resolute has very specific skills and policy expertise in air quality, and they have engaged in the good fight with South Coast AQMD and followed our direction from the board and from our executive office. So with that, staff would recommend Quintana and Associates.
Chair, I'll move that.
Okay, that's a motion. I see the hand raised by Mayor Lockdosa. Mayor, go ahead.
I was just going to make the motion, so I'll second it.
Mr. Chair, we need to call for public comment also.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Anybody in the auditorium? Nobody coming forward? Anybody remote? We'll give you a couple seconds. If you'd like to comment on this item, it's an action item to choose our legislative representation in Sacramento, another one. You have a few seconds, raise your hand. Seeing none, is there any discussion on the motion?
I would just say I've worked with both people in their former lives when I was in my former life, and they both are qualified. But I do like the fact that David has been focused on AQMD stuff for a long time now. He's been a trusted partner, and I think we continue on with what we know.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'll see no more hands raised. I'll call the question. Go ahead, roll call.
Mayor Lockdawson,
Aye.
Supervisor Hagman, Councilmember Olmos,
Yes.
Councilmember Caccioli.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
thank you. Great staff report, great work. Two great consultants. Thank you. Next item on our agenda, update on South Coast AQMD sponsored state legislation. Philip Crabb III, Senior Public Affairs Manager, LPAM.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I will provide an update regarding South Coast AQMD's 2025 sponsored state bill proposals. First, we have the cleanup bill for AB 2851 Bonta from 2024, and that's regarding fence line monitoring and metal shredding facilities. As a reminder, AB 2851 was signed into law and took effect on January 1st, 2025. It requires by January 1st, 2027 for air districts with metal shredding facilities in consultation with DTSC and OEHA to develop requirements for facility-wide fence line air quality monitoring at all metal shredding facilities. South Coast AQMD is working on amendments to last year's Bonta bill that would provide discretion for air districts to implement their existing rules for metal shredders as long as they are in place by January 1st, 2026. We are also working to require that air districts be reimbursed by metal shredding facilities for implementation costs incurred by districts as a result of this bill, versus the current provision which relies on our fee authority. Currently, we have a spot bill, AB 1338, Solache, and separately, Senator Caballero has SB 404 by Caballero, which is focused on revising how DTSC regulates metal shredding facilities throughout the state. We are working with these offices on our amendments. South Coast AQMD has also met with policy committee staff to help facilitate this effort. Second, we have the Cardboard Air District Representative Fair Compensation Bill. You might remember this from last year. This is a bill that would provide that cardboard members representing air districts who currently receive little to no compensation receive the same level of compensation as other voting cardboard members. This proposal has been introduced as AB 907 Chen and has been referred to Assembly Natural Resources Committee. South Coast AQMD staff is currently meeting with relevant legislative offices, including committee staff and committee members' offices to advocate for the bill. I'm happy to report that CAPCOA and the Bay Area Air District have also agreed to support the bill thus far. Finally, we have the statewide air quality incident response program bill that was mentioned earlier. This bill proposal has been introduced as AB 1106 Rodriguez and currently is in spot bill form. The bill would expand the existing CARB statewide air quality incident response program by creating regional air quality incident response centers to be located in and operated by local air districts. There would be at least one center here, and that would be in South Coast AQMD. This state-funded program would be a collaboration between CARB and local air districts and would modernize and enhance emergency air monitoring response at the state and local levels. These resources could be used to respond to situations involving wildfires or other emergencies. We worked with CARB and Legislative Council to prepare substantive language for the bill. And Senator Ben Allen, who is chair of the Budget Subcommittee regarding environmental issues, has joined onto the bill as a principal co-author and will also take the lead in pursuing an accompanying budget request to fund provisions of the bill. We are currently working with CARB to prepare cost estimates for the budget proposal. That is my report, and we'll be providing more updates as we move forward in the legislative process. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Committee members, any questions for staff? I see no hands raised. Just a quick question, Philip, where is Michelle Rodriguez? Where does her district encompass pretty much?
It's Inland Empire. She actually took over the same district as Freddie Rodriguez. That is, that's.
Chino Pomona, so she has some of my area, Pomona also?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. Is there any public comment on this item? None in the auditorium, see none online. Great reports. We'll move on to the next. And we have 10 minutes left, so we've got an update on federal and state legislative issues. So we'll start with federal legislative issues, and we'll give each person 1 minute. Give us an update. There's a lot going on CAP. We could talk for hours, but we'll start with Gary Huisman. Gary, go ahead with the Carmen Group.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I wanted to give a quick update today on reconciliation. As you know, this is the process by which President Trump is trying to get his basic tax and spending priorities enacted into law this year. This is separate from appropriations, but once Congress comes back from next week's recess, this will be front and center. And I had an opportunity last week to attend a meeting with Congressman Jason Smith, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. He's a key player in this whole process. And I want to just point out a couple of things he said that are of interest to people who are following this in some detail. Question of one or two bills. Is there going to be one bill or two bills to do this? He says it has to be one bill. The House will not be able, doesn't have the votes to pass two bills this year on this. Second, the timing, how long is this going to take? Is it going to take till the end of the year? The tax cut in 2017 didn't go through reconciliation until December. He says it has to be done ASAP. He has a plan to get it done by Memorial Day. Everybody in the audience laughed when he said that. Nobody believes it that I've talked to, but that's what his goal is to get it done by Memorial Day. The length of the bill is 10 years, but it could be whittled down to 8 years or less because of the need for offsets and spending cuts. Very difficult to get agreement of all the Republicans on this. It's very much up in the air right now. One other thing, he says, debt limit is part of this, so it's a very controversial thing. So it's a vote where there's only one or two Republican majority, so it's very difficult to get it through the House. So the House is driving this, and Chairman Smith just pointed out that he's in weekly contact with almost every member. He and the leadership are in weekly contact with almost every Republican member, day by day, week by week, to sort out the policy concerns that each of them has, trying to get through a lot of controversies and debates that have to be sorted out before this can get done. So it's a work in progress, but we're trying to stay on top of it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Gary. We'll hold the questions off till the end of the presentation. Jed Dearborn. Jed, go ahead, please, with Cassidy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Today, I will give a quick update on where things stand with fiscal year 25 appropriations. So on Tuesday, the House of Representatives passed a continuing resolution to fund the federal government through the remainder of the fiscal year on a party line vote. So the bill funds the government mostly at current levels, but does include a few controversial provisions that lost the bill bipartisan support in the House. Specifically, the bill provides the administration with added flexibility to reallocate funds among agency programs, and it also cuts thousands of earmarks that many members were expecting to deliver to their districts, and does not include any disaster aid. In the Senate, while the Democrats initially did indicate that they were opposed to the bill, last night, Minority Leader Schumer reversed course and announced he would deliver the votes to avoid taking the blame for a shutdown. Procedural votes on the bill will begin this afternoon, and we expect it to pass and fund the government and go to the president's desk in time to avoid a shutdown. On a parallel track, the FY26 appropriations process is ongoing, and we expect, with request deadlines to member offices closing this spring and subcommittee bill hearings and markups expected at the normal times this summer. And so hopefully FY26 is a bit less eventful than FY25. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jed. And finally, Mark Kadish. Mark, go ahead, please. Mark, you're on mute.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to give a quick update on the CRA, the Congressional Review Act. I think as you all are aware, the Trump administration and congressional majority are using the CRA, Congressional Review Act, to try to eliminate some recently approved California waivers. That's an expedited process, the CRA, that does not prevent filibustering in the Senate, and it's a simple majority vote. So it puts us in a very difficult position. I think our senators, Schiff and Padilla, who both serve on the Environment and Public Works Committee, as well as the ranking member of the Environment and Public Works Committee, in an attempt to show that how controversial this is, asked the General Accountability Office to do a report on the legality of using the CRA to overturn California's waivers. And the GAO gave an opinion that it simply was not eligible for CRA review and would not be legal to do this. GAO does not have a legal role in this, but I think it was very clever of our senators to set up what I assume will be a court battle over overturning these waivers eventually. They have until May, I believe, the middle of May, to do that. So I think it demonstrates that our senators are using whatever little opportunity they have to help us and help California preserve the waivers we do receive under the Clean Air Act. So with that, I'll also answer any questions.
Committee members, any questions for our federal consultants? Kurt?
Just with what the EPA came out with yesterday, and puts us in a tough spot, as Wayne was telling me this morning. It looks like it was relief in many ways from EPA, conditions, but we still have the Clean Air Act. What's the odds of Congress looking at that and modifying that going forward? Is it on the radar, I guess?
Supervisor, maybe I can jump in on that. That's an issue that staff is looking at. It's an issue that CAPCOA, the California Air Pollution Control Officers, is looking at. It's an issue that the American Association of Pollution Control Agencies is looking at. The thinking has been for the last several decades that it's very difficult to reopen the Clean Air Act because it would blow up. And so people haven't reopened it. But in fact, the Clean Air Act has been reopened. It was last reopened, my understanding was for some of the IRA grants that were made to allow for that process to move forward. So there have been very small instances. We're certainly looking at things that impact us. The board has directed us to see what more can the federal government be doing, and how can South Coast AQMD not be punished for results that are not the result of our own actions. And by that, when we see federal inaction that causes us to be in non-attainment, we shouldn't be subject to sanctions and things like that. The challenge is, though, how do you define that? Because you want people to go ahead and make those improvements in their program and not necessarily get a free ride. We, as being extreme non-attainment, have no other options. Our back is against the wall, and the walls are closing in. And what happened with all of the recent congressional actions, or I'm sorry, what happened with all of the recent announcements that were made by EPA makes it even more tough on us. And we're in the middle of evaluating what those impacts are, and we'll come back to the board with a more complete description. But to your specific question, yes, we are looking at those, and we will be coming back to the board.
Is that good, Kurt? Okay, then we'll move on without any other hands raised. Thank you, gentlemen, to the state legislative update. We'll start with Mr. Quintana. David, go ahead, please. Just a minute. You got a minute. We're going to be a little over time, but I try to get it all in a minute, David. You're quick.
Well, this could have been uncomfortable. Glad it's not. I do have one update, and that is that we now have a full complement of legislators in the legislature. Stan Ellis, the Republican in Assembly District 32, has now officially replaced Vince Vaughn, who went to Congress a long time ago. And Tony Strickland has now replaced Janice Nguyen in Senate District 36. So again, both of those Republican for Republican.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Next, Ross Buckley. Ross, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Just wanted to provide an update about 3 new California Air Resources Board appointments, 2 done by the governor of Miss Linda Hopkins and Don Ortiz-Legg. They are both county supervisors until 2 of the 6 local air district seats. And then the third was the Assembly member Corey Jackson has announced that the Speaker Rivas has appointed him as an ex officio member of CARB. Mr. Jackson is from the Riverside area. That completes my verbal report.
Thank you, Ross. And Paul Gonzalez. Paul, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Just wanted to provide a brief update on the February 2025 cap and trade auction results. Prices did decrease from the last auction back in November of 2024, reflecting the uncertainty among the market and the need for the legislature to renew the program. But as far as the February results, it was the 18th consecutive sold-out auction. All current and future vintage allowances offered for sale were purchased. However, the prices for both of those, the current and the future allowances, decreased by over $2 each. So this auction is only going to generate about $851 million for the GGRF, which is a notable drop from the February 2024 auction, which generated $1.3 billion. So we'll continue to keep you apprised of the future auction results, along with updates on the negotiations on extending the cap and trade program. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Committee members, any questions for our Sacramento consultants? See no hands raised. Good. Thank you, Mayor. Any public comment? Nobody in the auditorium? Anybody at our remote sites? Anybody online? Nope. Thank you very much. We'll move on. Other matters, 5, any other business committee members? Staff? For the business, we'll move to item number 6, public comment period. If you'd like to comment, now's your chance to raise your hand. Because of timing, you'll have 1 minute. If you want to comment anything under this committee's jurisdiction, please raise your hand right now. No hands raised. We'll move on. Our next meeting is Friday, April 11th, 2025 at 9 a.m. I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye.